Hello again, gentle viewers, and welcome back to The Broken Wheel. This episode will be my breakdown of the second episode of the season titled Shadows Wait. If you're not already, please consider subscribing to the channel to help it grow. But with that said, let our journey begin again. So starting out the episode, we come into a camp of the Children of the Light, or White Cloaks as they're more commonly known. They are a group of religious fanatics that started out as an organization to find servants of the Dark One called Dark Friends, but they've since expanded their influence. They are totally against anyone channeling the One Power, seeing it as the cause of the breaking of the world, and as such are very hostile to the Aes Sedai. We meet Lord Captain Iman Valda, and right off the bat you can tell that this is a villain in this story, for we see him having a meal while he's burning this woman, presumably a yellow Aes Sedai, alive. He really comes across almost like a serial killer, if you think about it, for he has a particular type of victim, which is the Aes Sedai. Kind of feels like he's misogynistic as well. He definitely enjoys the torture, as the fire is not as big as it could be, so he's kind of slow cooking to prolong the agony. And of course he keeps trophies, being the great serpent rings. He also seems to be a symbol of patriarchy, what little of it there actually is, for the Children of the Light are a male-only order. I like the actor they have playing him, so it's going to be really interesting to see him more in the coming episodes. Unlike the first episode, we actually get an intro for the series, and I like how this is all being very symbolic of the pattern, with all of the kind of threads being woven together, which is how the people of the world kind of view destiny or fate, as the pattern being spun out by the wheel of time. And it all comes together in this collage of the different Aes Sedai Ajas. And we rejoin our cast of characters as they're still running from Trollocs. They finally come to a river crossing at night and bribe the ferryman to take them across immediately. And he does so, and then the Trollocs show up, and Moraine makes a comment that Trollocs don't like to cross running water. That's more of a Myrddraal weakness than Trollocs. However, I think what they're more implying is they don't want to get into deep water because their bodies just aren't meant for swimming and they have no buoyancy. So if they get into deep water, they're going to sink like a rock. So they manage to get across. However, the ferryman wants to go back because he knows his son is arriving, and tries to cross the river, and then Moraine uses the power to sink the ferry. Now, she didn't intend to kill the ferryman in the process, but it was an unfortunate consequence, and this kind of plants a seed of distrust among the Two Rivers folk, especially Rand. So when they camp for the night, Moraine takes Egwene aside and puts her through a basic test to see if Egwene can channel. Moraine makes a simple weave to cause the gem in her hand to flash a couple of times, and then it flashes a third time, and Moraine tells Egwene that the first two were hers, but the third one was Egwene's, showing that she does have the potential to be an Aes Sedai. So during the night, Rand has this nightmare where he is coughing up a bat out of his mouth, and then for an instant we see this figure standing before him. And when he awakens, he finds a dead bat by himself, and then when he rejoins the others, finds that the other three from the Two Rivers have also got these bats near them, and Moraine questions them about their dreams, and Perrin tells her
there was a man, eyes like embers.
And she's very disturbed by this and orders them to tell her if they have any more dreams about this figure. And Ren gets very frustrated with her about... He's really more upset that he knows that Egwene has the potential to be an Aes Sedai, and again feels like she's being pulled away from him and kind of makes an ass out of himself, to which Moraine and Egwene, they both chastise him for his behavior, and even Matt comments,
The lady does shoot fireballs, so let's try it and stay on the good side.
So the party ends up encountering the Children of the Light that we saw at the very beginning of the episode, being led by this one individual whom by his shoulder guard made of gold you can tell is the leader. And this is Geoffrey Bornhold, who is actually one of the more level-headed leaders of the Children of the Light. Supposedly he's supposed to be the same rank as Valda, but they've kind of changed that up. For Valda's one of the questioners. These are individuals that perform the interrogations, i.e. torture, of the Children of the Light to get confessions out of supposed dark friends. Their actual name is the Hand of the Light, as in the hand that uncovers the truth. Questioners is a term that they don't like, but in the series it appears they're very comfortable with it. But first, Bernhold seems content to simply let the travelers pass, but Valda wants to investigate things more thoroughly and even tries to see if he can taunt any of them by flashing his serpent rings that he's taken, and gets very handsy with Moraine, definitely suspecting her to be an Aes Sedai, and asks Lan,
Where did you say you were from?
I didn't. But I'm from the borderlands, where men know how to keep their hands to themselves, lest they lose them.
So Valda ends up discovering Moraine's wound, and she lets them know that there are Trollocs in the area, to which Bornhold, who's more of the militant side of the Children of the Light, is very concerned about and wants to investigate, while Valda is more skeptical and decides he wants to go a different direction. And again, we kind of see how Bornhold's more level-headed in that he does recommend that Moraine seek the healing services of the Aes Sedai. So Egwene questions Moraine about her oaths, as she is not supposed to be able to lie, but then says that when they encountered the Children of the Light, she did lie, and Moraine points out that the wording that she used in the conversation was not a direct lie. It was meant to mislead, but it wasn't an outright lie, basically giving her a little bit of a lesson in what it means to be an Aes Sedai. And then as they're riding along, Matt starts to sing a Two Rivers song mentioning the lost nation of Manetheren, which they're not familiar with. They all sing the song, but they don't have any idea of its meaning. Moraine tells them the story of Manetheren, how it was a mountain nation in the area that is modern-day Two Rivers, and that during the Trolloc Wars, it came under siege by a massive host of Trollocs, and they were promised aid if they could hold for 3 days. That aid never came, and they managed to hold out for 13 days until their entire army was wiped out to the last person. In her grief of losing her husband, the Queen of Manetheren, who was an Aes Sedai, channeled a huge amount of the One Power, more than she could handle, and swept the entire area with fire, consuming the Dark One's army as well as burning herself from the inside out. So Perrin's at a nearby stream getting water for the group, and he's looking at this bad wound that he has on one of his legs when he hears wolves approaching and sees that he's now surrounded by about 10 or 12 of them. And of course he's obviously frightened about what they're going to do until one of them comes up to him and actually ends up licking his wound, as in the wolf is caring for him, and then they all leave. And this is a further implication that Perrin is a wolf brother, which is someone who can actually talk to wolves. He's unaware of this ability and just starting to understand what it is. Close to dawn, the Dark One's forces catch up to the party, and they end up making a mad run into this mysterious walled city, and the Trollocs don't follow them. There's a sign right there, but they keep going, and then when they take shelter inside of one of the buildings, Lan tells them this is Shadar Logoth, which means shadows waiting in the old tongue. During the Trolloc Wars, they were the ones who pledged to help Manetheren, but instead walled up the entire city in this giant wall to wait out the Trolloc Wars, forsaking the rest of the nation. After the wars were over, people eventually broke into the wall because it had no entrance and found the city deserted. To which Matt replies,
A couple of things. One, that's more words than you've said all day, probably ever. And two, why in Light's name did you bring us here?
So the young people are naturally very curious about this place because you have to remember these are small town folk who have never been outside of their home. So this is the first city they've ever been in, and so they're very much awed by the size and the scale of everything they're seeing, in spite of the obvious tension of a place even Trollocs don't want to enter. Matt ends up talking to Perrin about his late wife Layla and how she made a knife for Matt, which he feels should now belong to Perrin because Layla never made weapons, she only made tools, and Matt kind of explains how the knife was meant to be used as a tool for saving the people he loves. Again, we see Perrin feeling the guilt and shame what he did to his wife. During the night, Matt awakens and is drawn outside by the moving of shadows, which leads him to a box where he finds this dagger with a sizable ruby inside of it. And this is a actually very pivotal moment, which later on you'll see play out more. When he comes back, the horses start freaking out as this darkness starts covering the walls, the ground, and everything, and the horse just disintegrates, and they all get separated by it and end up running their different ways to get out of the city. So Rand and Matt end up getting out through a water drainage hole, which they managed to break through. Perrin and Egwene end up going up the wall until they can't go any further and are forced to jump off the edge of the wall into the nearby river. Lan takes Moraine and manages to ride out with both their horses nearby, and then he stops to check on Moraine, and then something gets the drop on him. We see this blade come out of nowhere. I knew immediately this was Nynaeve because she's the only one who's ever been able to get the drop on Lan. And that is where the episode ends, with the party being separated and all three of them going in different directions. So I hope you've enjoyed my breakdown of the second episode of The Wheel of Time. As always, if you've enjoyed this content, please consider dropping a like or subscribing to the channel, or both. But until the next time, may the light be with you.